Tom Hanks read the last line of the letter and did not look up. He stayed with the page. His eyes had stopped moving. He had finished reading. The words had run out. There was nothing left on the paper, but he did not look up. He held the letter in both hands, and he looked at the last line, and the studio waited for him, and the studio got silence. Jimmy Fallon opened his mouth. Nothing came out. He tried again. His lips moved. The beginning of a word formed and dissolved. He put one hand on the desk. He looked at Tom Hanks. He looked at the audience. He looked back at Tom Hanks. His mouth was moving and producing nothing, which is a thing that does not happen to Jimmy Fallon. A man who has spoken for a living for 20 years. A man who has never in his professional life been at a loss for what to say next. He was at a loss. 300 people in that studio did not make a sound. It was a Thursday night taping. February 2024. The Tonight Show starring Jimmy Fallon. Tom Hanks was the guest. A new film. Standard booking. The rundown had been set for days. He had walked out the way he always walks out. Already present. Already giving the room something before he has said a word. The specific gift of a man who understands that an audience is not a crowd but a collection of individual people who have each decided to show up, and who treats them accordingly. He had sat down. He had crossed his legs. He had looked at Jimmy Fallon with the attentiveness of a man who is actually going to engage, not perform engagement. And the interview had moved from that first moment with the ease of two people who have done this many times and have over those many times become genuinely fond of each other. The interview had been good. Tom Hanks had been talking about the new film, about a character he had found difficult in a way that turned out to be productive, about the specific pleasure of being surprised by something you thought you already knew how to do. He was generous and unhurried. He had said one thing that made 300 people go completely still in the good way, the way an audience goes still when something true has been said directly in front of them, and they need a moment to absorb it. Then Jimmy Fallon said, "I have something I want to give you." He picked up an envelope from the desk. He said, "A man named Gerald Simmons drove up from Philadelphia this morning. He's in the audience tonight. He brought this for you." He said his mother wrote it in 1993. He said she died the year after. He said he has been carrying it for 30 years and he thought it was time. Tom Hanks looked at the envelope. He looked at the audience. He took the envelope with both hands and removed the letter inside and unfolded it. 3 pages, handwritten, the paper slightly yellowed at the folds, the handwriting careful and deliberate, the handwriting of someone who had not written many letters but was taking this one seriously. He began to read. The studio went completely quiet. He read the first page. He turned to the second. He read slowly, not for performance, slowly because the words required it, because the sentences were careful and meant, and he was giving them the time they deserved. On the second page, something shifted in his face. The professional composure that Tom Hanks carries into every public room, not falseness, not armor, simply the ease of a man who has learned to be himself in front of cameras. Something in it changed. Went quieter. Went more interior. By the third page, he was not in the studio anymore. He was somewhere else entirely, some private place the letter had taken him, a place that had no cameras in it, and no audience, and no rundown, just the words on the paper and whatever they were doing to him. He finished reading. He did not look up. The entire studio froze. 300 people held their breath watching Tom Hanks hold 3 pages of handwritten paper in a television studio and stay with them in a silence that was not uncomfortable and was not empty, but was full of something none of them could name, something that had arrived in the room with the letter and had not yet decided to leave. Jimmy Fallon tried to speak. His mouth moved. The word wouldn't come. He tried again. Nothing. He made a small gesture with one hand that was not a gesture toward anything, just the body's attempt to do something useful when the mind has gone quiet. He pressed his lips together. He looked at the desk. He looked at Tom Hanks. He shook his head once, slowly, a gesture that meant, I have nothing. I have nothing at all. 300 people held their breath. To understand what that letter contained, you need to understand what happened in 1993. Tom Hanks wasn't always Tom Hanks. 2 Academy Awards, one of the most beloved figures in American cinema, a man whose name has come to stand for something specific and trustworthy in the culture of the last 40 years. In the winter of 1993, he was 37 years old and 3 films into a run that would change the shape of his career and of American cinema in ways that none of them could have been predicted to do from the outside. Philadelphia was in production. A League of Their Own had just finished its run. He was in the middle of a period of work that was not obviously a period. It looked from the inside, the way all work looks from the inside, which is one project at a time, one character at a time, one true thing at a time. He did not know, in 1993, what those films were doing in the world. Not fully. You cannot know, from the inside of the work, what the work is doing to the people who receive it. You can know that you tried. You can know that you found something real in the character. You cannot know what it means to a woman in Philadelphia who works the overnight shift cleaning offices and spends her days off at a dollar theater, because it is the cheapest place she has found to be somewhere other than her apartment. Her name was Dorothy Simmons. She was 54 years old in 1993. She had a 6th grade education and a son named Gerald and a 2-room apartment in West Philadelphia that she had kept clean and warm through 30 years of work that did not pay well and did not offer benefits and did not ask her opinion about anything. She was a woman of considerable interior life who had not had many occasions to demonstrate it publicly, because the public occasions available to her had not generally been interested in what she thought or felt about things. She read when she could. She wrote letters she mostly did not send. She went to the movies when the Dollar Theater on Chestnut Street was showing something that seemed worth the dollar. She had watched A League of Their Own on a Thursday afternoon in September 1992, and had sat in her seat through the credits because she was not ready to leave the room where it had happened. She had come back the following Thursday and watched it again. She had not been able to say precisely what it had done to her, except that it had made her feel that something ordinary could be large, could be worth the full attention of a camera, could be worth a story told all the way to the end. In the spring of 1993, the Dollar Theater showed Philadelphia. She watched it alone on a Tuesday evening and walked home in the cold and sat at her kitchen table for a long time before she went to bed. The following Thursday, she watched it again. Then she went back to her apartment, and she got out the writing paper she kept in the kitchen drawer, and she wrote a letter to her son Gerald, who was 23 years old and living in a rented room in South Philadelphia and working construction, and whom she wrote to every few weeks with the small, specific news of her life and the large, unspecific love that mothers carry for their children, and mostly deliver in code. She did not intend, when she began the letter, to write about Tom Hanks. She intended to write about Gerald's cousin who had been sick, and about the church sale, and about the winter coming on earlier than expected. But the letter went somewhere else. It went to the movie. And once it was there, it kept going, the way certain letters do when you have been keeping something to yourself for longer than you realized, and the paper is finally asking you to give it up. She wrote, I want to tell you about a movie I have seen twice this month. It is called Philadelphia, and the man in it is named Tom Hanks. You may know him from the baseball movie, the one about the women's team during the war, which I also saw, and which I also want to tell you about. But this one I need to tell you about first, because it did something to me I am still trying to understand. She wrote, "This man in the movie is a lawyer who is very sick and is treated badly by people who should know better. And what Tom Hanks does, and I am not a person who knows how to talk about acting, I don't know the words for it. What he does is he makes you feel that this man is a real person who is owed the same things every person is owed. Not because the movie tells you to feel that, because of something in how he is when the camera is on him. He is just there. He is just fully there, like there is no camera, like there is only this man and his life, and you are being permitted to see it. I have seen movies for 40 years, and I do not know that I have seen that before. Not like that." She wrote, "I went back and watched the baseball movie again afterward the same night, and it is the same thing. He is just there. And what it makes me feel, and I am going to try to say this right because I have been thinking about it all week. What it makes me feel is that someone who looks like the people I know, who talks like them, who is tired like them and trying like them, can be the person the whole story is about. Not the background. The whole story. About their dignity. About what they deserve. I did not know I needed to see that until I saw it, and then I understood I had needed to see it for a long time." She wrote, "I do not know if this man knows what he is doing to people when he does what he does. I do not think you can know that from the inside. But I want you to know, Gerald, in case it is ever useful to know, that there are people out here who are watching and for whom it is not a small thing, for whom it is in fact a large thing, for whom it has been a kind of permission." She wrote 2 more pages after that. About Gerald's father, who had left when Gerald was 4. About what she had tried to give Gerald in his absence. About the things she wished she had said earlier, and the things she was saying now because she was 54, and she had begun to understand that later is not a guaranteed delivery. She folded the letter. She put it in an envelope. She addressed it to Gerald at his South Philadelphia address. She did not send it. She did not know why, at the time. Later, much later, after she was gone, when Gerald found the letter in the kitchen drawer with the writing paper and the pen she kept there, he understood. He understood that some things get written, to be made true on paper, to be released into language even if the language never travels. She had needed to say it. She had said it. The saying of it had been enough. She died in October of 1994 from a heart attack, in the apartment she had kept clean and warm for 30 years, on a Tuesday afternoon when Gerald was at work and could not be called in time. Gerald Simmons had found the letter 3 weeks after her death, going through her things with the particular attention of a son who has just lost his mother and is not ready to throw anything away. He had read it at the kitchen table, in the apartment, in the place where she had written it. He had not been able to finish it the first time. He had come back to it the following day and finished it. He had kept it in his wallet for 6 years, until the wallet wore out. Then he had put it in a small wooden box that he kept on his dresser. It had stayed in the box for 30 years, moved from apartment to apartment, through a marriage, and a divorce, and a second marriage, and 2 children, and a house in West Philadelphia 2 miles from the apartment, where his mother had watched movies and written letters she did not send. He had thought about Tom Hanks for 30 years in the way his mother had described, not as a celebrity, not as a famous person, but as someone who had given his mother something she needed at a time when she needed it, without knowing he had done so. without asking for anything in return. His daughter had found the Tonight Show submission form. Gerald had looked at it for 2 days before he filled it out. Behind the scenes, the Tonight Show producer who received Gerald Simmons's submission had made a decision that defied every expectation. She had not sent it to a researcher. She had printed the transcription Gerald had included with his submission and brought it directly to Jimmy Fallon before the pre-interview meeting with Tom Hanks. Jimmy had read it at his desk. He had not said anything for a moment. Then he had said, "He doesn't know about this at all?" The producer had said, "Nothing." Jimmy had said, "He reads it cold. On camera. We don't prepare him." The producer had said, "That was my thought too." Tom Hanks had not been told a letter existed. He had not been told about Dorothy Simmons or Gerald or the Dollar Theater on Chestnut Street. He had come to the studio for a standard booking on a Thursday in February and sat down at the desk and talked about a new film, and the envelope had been on the desk the whole time, waiting. Gerald Simmons was in the 4th row. He had driven up from Philadelphia that morning. He had brought the letter in the same small wooden box he had kept it in for 30 years. Now Jimmy Fallon understood why he could not speak. He looked at Tom Hanks, who was still looking at the last line of the letter. He looked at the audience. He made the small, useless hand gesture again. He pressed his lips together. He shook his head. He stood up. It was not a planned movement. It was the movement of a body that can no longer remain seated in the presence of what is happening in the room. But this is the moment no one in the studio and no one watching at home ever saw coming. Tom Hanks looked up from the letter. His eyes found the audience. He was not searching for Gerald. He did not know Gerald was there. He was looking at the audience the way a person looks when they have just been told something enormous and need the faces of other people to help them absorb the size of it. He said, "Who wrote this?" Jimmy Fallon pointed to the 4th row. Gerald Simmons stood up. He was 54 years old, the same age his mother had been when she wrote the letter, a fact he had not mentioned to anyone and would only later realize. He was a solid and quiet man with his mother's patient quality, the patience of someone who has spent a long time carrying something carefully. Tom Hanks stood up from the chair. He held the letter out toward Gerald, not to return it, to show it to him. To show him that he had held it, that he understood what it was. He said, "Your mother wrote this." Gerald said, "Yes, sir." Tom Hanks said, "She never sent it." Gerald said, "No, sir. I found it in her kitchen drawer." Tom Hanks said nothing for a moment. His mouth moved. Nothing came out. He put one hand to the side of his face, a gesture that was not wiping anything but simply placing a hand there, against the skin, the way you ground yourself when the ground has shifted. He said, "She wrote that I didn't know what I was doing to people." Gerald said, "Yes." Tom Hanks said, "She was right. I didn't know." He looked at the letter. "I still don't know, most of the time. You just try to find something true and you hope it reaches someone." He looked at Gerald Simmons. "You never know who it reaches. You never know what it means when it gets there." Gerald said, "It meant a lot to my mother." Tom Hanks said, "I can see that." He looked at the letter again for a moment. Then he looked at Gerald and he said, "Your mother gave me something tonight that I will carry for the rest of my life. And I want you to know that." She thought she was writing a letter to her son. She was also writing a letter to me. It just took 30 years to arrive. Gerald Simmons put both hands over his face. He was not a man who cried easily. He was a man whose emotion lived in stillness, in the patience his mother had given him. And the stillness broke now, quietly, the way stillness breaks when the thing it has been holding is finally set down. Jimmy Fallon was standing at the side of the desk, with both hands flat on the surface, holding himself up, mouth still not producing words, which was no longer a failure of language, but a complete and appropriate response to what was happening in the room. He turned to the audience. He spread his hands. His mouth moved once more. Nothing came. He sat back down and put his head in his hands for a moment, and 300 people watched him not speak and understood that this was the most honest thing he could offer. Questlove was completely still. 3 camera operators had stopped looking through their viewfinders. The director in the control room held the shot and did not call for commercial for 14 minutes. 300 people rose without being asked, and the sound they made was not applause exactly. Or, not only applause, it was the sound a room makes when it has been given something true and has no other way to say thank you. Tom Hanks and Gerald Simmons talked for 45 minutes after the cameras stopped. Tom Hanks asked Gerald to tell him about his mother. Gerald told him. He told him about the Dollar Theater on Chestnut Street, and the letters she kept in the kitchen drawer, and the 2-room apartment she had kept clean and warm for 30 years. He told him about finding the letter after she died. He told him about carrying it in his wallet until the wallet wore out. Tom Hanks listened the way his mother had described him listening on screen, fully, without looking for a way to be somewhere else, simply present in the room with the thing being offered to him. Before Gerald left, Tom Hanks asked if he could hold the letter one more time. Gerald gave it to him. Tom Hanks held it for a moment and then gave it back. He said, "Keep it. It belongs to you. It always belonged to you. She left it for you to find." Gerald Simmons drove back to Philadelphia that night. He stopped at the house in West Philadelphia, 2 miles from where his mother had lived. He sat in the car for a moment before going inside. The small wooden box is still on his dresser. The letter is in it. He takes it out sometimes, not often, and reads it at the kitchen table the way she would have wanted it read, slowly, in the morning, with the particular attention that things deserve when they have traveled a long way to reach you. Tom Hanks has never spoken publicly about that evening without mentioning Dorothy Simmons. He mentions her by name. He says, "A woman in Philadelphia sat in a Dollar Theater in 1993 and wrote down what she felt, and I only found out 30 years later." He says, "I did not know." He says it simply, without apology, because the not knowing is not something to apologize for. It is simply the truth of what it is to make something and release it into the world and trust the world to carry it to the people who need it. Dorothy Simmons needed it. She told her son so in a letter in a kitchen drawer. Her son carried it for 30 years in a wallet and a wooden box and drove it to New York on a Thursday morning in February. Some letters are written to one person and find another. Some things are made in the dark and light a room the maker never entered. Some permissions arrive 30 years late and matter just as much. Dorothy Simmons knew that. She wrote it down. She just didn't know who else would read it. Now the whole world has.